Hey guys, what's going on? It's Hey Coach Ryan. I do the stupid things with my hands. I don't know why. I'm Coach Ryan Knapp. This is episode 7, and we're going to jump directly into Erica's question, which asks, do I think some bodies just aren't made for ultramarathoning? Are the injury prone able to become less injury prone, or is injury just something that she's going to have to deal with over the course of time? Now, Erica's had some injuries in the past when she was in high school, out of high school. Ran healthy, didn't run healthy, ran healthy, didn't run healthy. Now we're running fairly healthy, but she's having just some issues and that creep up, and she's just getting a little frustrated and asking, is her dream of running an ultramarathon, not valid? I've had to think about this a little bit, and I really think given the correct amount of time and given the correct amount of consistency, that anyone could run an ultramarathon. Now, we have to look at what I mean and how that's going to happen. It doesn't mean right now. And this is the issue that we're having, not you, Erica, but in running in general, is we have to respect the amount of time that it takes to be able to do things and the amount of consistency. I'm going to put it over here. The amount of consistency that it takes to be able to do these sorts of events. Every time you go out and you do a run, and you run a day, and you run over the course of a week and months and years, you essentially bank that mileage. And that mileage that you bank is what you build off of to be able to do these events. And the most important thing is that you're out there running. If you're able to go and run 10 miles or 15 miles or 20 miles a week, and that's where you're at right now before you start to have some injuries, then you run that 10 miles or that 15 miles or that 20 miles, and you let your body build up its resistance, and you let your body become more efficient. And then you can run 25 miles, and then you can run 27 miles and 30 miles. But you know what? That happens over time. That happens over weeks and months and years. All right. And for some people, unfortunately, it happens slower than others. Some people deal with more injuries and they have more things that we need to fix. And so we look to fix them. Running is an overused sport and injuries occur. We want to lessen the amount of injuries that occur, but things can happen just based on running being what it is. Now, we don't want to use that as an excuse, and we want to work on, massage and yoga and work on just self-manipulation and being able to solve these problems as we can, and training smart, because that helps us to avoid some of these things. But the main thing is consistency. I would rather take a runner, for someone that's going to run an ultra, for someone that's running 4 or 5 times a week for 30 minutes, more than someone that goes out and runs twice a week for 3 hours. Because the consistency is where they're going to thrive, because their body says, I can do this. I can run 5 or 6 times a week. All right, I'm going to build up a little bit more, and I'm going to build up a little bit more. And all of a sudden, 6 times a week of 30 minutes becomes 6 times a week of 45 minutes, and then 6 times a week of an hour, which is double the amount of 6 times, a half hour. And so that consistency is where you're going to get through. Now, what happens in ultras is as we start to train more and we start to put on more mileage without the consistency, and we start to look over time, when we have an injury, that injury risk is much greater as we start to train more. So if we ramp up our mileage too fast, any sort of thing we've got going on in our body that's not used to it, any sort of instability or imbalance, just really comes out and sees the light of day super fast. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to just get into a pattern of training that allows you to run consistently and lets you build up that mileage. And then as you become more bulletproof as a runner, we start to run more, and we run more, and we run more, and we continue to do that. And that's how you build up. Because when you've built up from 15 miles to 40 miles a week, you have all those miles in the bank as you get to 40 miles, and now you're running 40 miles healthy, and boom, you're ready to roll. What should happen is that your training should dictate the race that you're going to run, not the other way around. And I've thought a lot about this, and really that's what we want to do. So if you're running 20 or 30 miles a week, half marathon, maybe a marathon, probably half marathon is where you want to be. And run your half marathons and be happy, because you're going to see success and you're going to see improvement. And then when you can increase your mileage a little bit, sure, go up to a marathon or look at a 50K. And then as you become more consistent and you bank all that mileage, then you can look at, 50K, 50 mile. And it's not saying that people aren't going to follow this advice or that you can't do it and it's impossible, but we're looking at a way to do it that's sustainable, and that a way that we can do it that's injury free. And that could take for some people months and more likely take years. But if you're in running for the long haul, we're willing to take that time, and we're willing to sacrifice that time to get to where we want to be. And what you don't want to do is follow the injury cycle. All right. And the injury cycle is pretty simple, and it's something that you see in a lot of runners when they come back. So they have an injury, then they come back from an injury, and then they try to train a little bit too hard because of the time that they've missed from their injury, and then they end up going back to being injured again because they went at it a little bit too hard. So you want to break this. We want to get out of this injury cycle of having things. If we have an injury, we want to treat that injury, address it, and make sure that we've come back consistently at a lower mileage, and then get back in it and just go for it. The other thing that happens with runners too is they start chasing injuries around, and this can happen just based on your body. I don't have any good explanation for why this happens. It's probably something to look up for another episode. But let's say you have like an issue like plantar fasciitis or something like that. So you solve the plantar fasciitis, right? But then you realize that when you solve it, it was actually up like in your hip that you were having an issue. So now you solve the issue in your hip, but then you realize that the issue in your hip was actually coming from a really tight low back. And then you realize that the tight low back was coming from terrible, the guy doesn't have shoulders, but coming from terrible shoulders from sitting like this every day at your computer. And then you fix that. But then when you fix that, something else. So you end up just, what I call just chasing injuries around. And this can happen. And then once you get this body in equilibrium, then you're ready to roll. So for some people, the injury chase keeps happening, and you want to keep treating those areas and hitting those areas as you go. And as we build out training, and we can even just look at this, as we build out training and continue to build our miles, what we want to do is make sure that we have those lower points of training, those points of training where we can recover and we can deal with the issues that we have, and we can remain consistent in our training. So I do think that, I think that everybody can handle running. Some bodies right now are better to handle running than others. Take 10 people and start them brand new. You will have 10 different ways that people adapt to running. Some woman will be able to go out and run 50 miles a week and never get hurt and run that ever. One lady will take 2 steps out of her door and her foot's gonna hurt. And so what we need to do is individually look at where we are, fix the things that we can, maintain that consistency, build that consistency over weeks, months, and years, put in those miles, and then we'll be able to draw those miles out. That's my thoughts on it. I'm sure I'll have more thoughts as I go because I'm already starting to churn some up, but that's where we are now. So thank you so much, Erica, for the awesome question. We're going to get you healthy. Don't worry. If you guys have any thoughts about it, you disagree, you agree, make sure to chime in and let me know. And we will be back tomorrow with episode 8.